Welcome to PsychTech. My name is Josué Cardona, and with me is
Kelli Dunlap.
And we are here to talk about what?
Psych.
And tech?
And together that makes us...
PsychTech?
With authority, man. PsychTech.
I wasn't sure. It is our first episode. Okay. All right. I like it. We're PsychTech. What are we going to talk about today?
I'm gonna guess psych and tech.
Okay. Good. How did we come to this? What happened? What led us here?
So a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, on Twitter, I found Josué. And, finding somebody who likes psych and tech and PsychTech, it's very unusual. So we became besties, and we met at PAX, and we had a lot of good times, and he had me on his podcast, which is Geek Therapy. And then, just a couple months later, I started watching a show called Black Mirror, and decided, wow, I really need to process this, and I want to share it with other people to help me process it. And I decided that Josué would be like the perfect person to process it with and then share it with everybody here. And that's how PsychTech began. And
it's funny because you said, I want to talk about it. I don't just want to write about it. And in the back of my mind, I've had this idea to kind of spin off of Geek Therapy and do something way more tech related. It delves into educational technology, video games, wearables, digital health, all that kind of stuff. I used to be a biomedical engineer. I have a degree in electronics and a degree in mental health counseling. So it's kind of like something I've been wanting to do for a long time, but I didn't want to do another show on my own. I wanted to, get a partner. And when you mentioned, Black Mirror, I kind of threw that whole idea at you, and here we are.
Yep. And it's kind of crazy. Like you said, you started in tech and then you came to psych. And I was the other way around. I have a doctorate in clinical psychology and I just started a program in game design. So, we kind of came at it in two totally different ways, but now we're like mind melding on the same level, and it's super exciting.
Oh, and I mean, for context, you've been into gaming for years and you run a community. Like, talk a little bit about that.
Oh, I've been gaming since before I could walk, and I love gaming. I met my husband through Halo, as crazy as that sounds, and I run an online community for a Halo fan site for a very specific type called Griffball, and I've been doing that for over 7 years now, and I'm part of the Halo community, and I've spoken at PAX and whatnot on gaming and mental health, and that's actually what my dissertation was on, so this is kind of right up my alley.
Yep. So I'm hoping we'll talk about everything that you've been into, everything I've done, and then a lot more that interests us, that kind of intersects between all of that.
Yes, the strategic collision of psychology and technology.
Strategic collision. All right.
Oh, yes.
All right. So I think your idea was fantastic to talk about this TV show called Black Mirror. It blew my mind, right? The couple of episodes I've seen so far. So maybe not every week, right? But we'll start today. I think it's a great way to start. Talk about this first episode of the TV show and then kind of what it means, kind of some of the ideas. Like you said, let's process it together. And I think a lot of really cool stuff will come from that conversation. And then maybe over time we can hit every episode in the series.
I think that's a fantastic place to start. So Black Mirror is currently on Netflix. It's a BBC show, and it was described to me as Twilight Zone, but like contemporary. So Twilight Zone with technology. And the first episode was called National Anthem. And basically kind of a brief summary is the princess is kidnapped, and one of the British princesses, obviously, is kidnapped and is held for ransom. And the ransom is delivered to the PM, and it basically says, have sex with a pig on live TV, or I'm going to kill the princess.
Yeah, and that's posted on Twitter. On YouTube, for everybody to see. And
yes.
And if you haven't seen the episode and that interests you, like, stop right now, go watch the episode, and then come back.
Oh yeah, spoiler alert.
Yeah, I mean, no, but that's a great setup for the show, right? Once that happens like 3 minutes in. You know that's what's happening. And once at that point, I was set. I couldn't believe that was happening. He has to have sex with a pig live on TV with very specific technical specifications of how it has to be done, just to make sure that it's really happening live on national television. Crazy.
Yeah, there's no trickery, there's no special effects. Like, it really is the Prime Minister having sex with a pig.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's how swine flu started, but
Is that Black Mirror canon, or is that real life?
I don't think it's true anywhere, actually.
All right, so walk me through it. So what was it? First thoughts, like, at what point did you say, or should we just go through the episode? Kind of, what happened?
I think it's kind of good to go through it, like, as it happened. Because you said when they talked about it being put up on Facebook, that was, like, the hook for you.
I said Twitter, but then I said YouTube. You just said Facebook.
Oh, Twitter.
It was YouTube.
It was all of them. But yeah, when they first talked to the Prime Minister and he asked, who knows about this? And the staff gets really quiet and they're like, well, it was uploaded to YouTube 10 minutes ago. And, the PM starts to freak out a little bit and he's like, well, shut it down. And they say, well, every time we try to, but every time we shut down one, 8 mirrors pop up other places. And I'm like, oh, that's so true. Like, that is such a YouTube kind of thing. Like, it's going viral. Yeah. And I was just really excited because it's like some of the episodes are placed further in the future, but this one's like 15 minutes in the future. Or it could be like right now. It's not some far-flung, Star Trek or universe. It could be happening right now.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. I don't think there's anything in the episode that couldn't happen right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we're going to get to it, but I think some of the reactions might be a little fantastic and far-flung, but most of it is kind of scarily spot on. And I remember this kind of defining moment in that first opening scene, and the PM is sitting in a window and he's just kind of dismissed, I'm not having sex with a pig. And one of his assistants comes up and says, sir, you're trending on Twitter, and the poll numbers look really good in your favor. And I just sat there and was like, oh my gosh, it's all about the mob. It's all about the power of the internet. Like, this guy feels empowered because Twitter is behind him. Like, that is the important message we're getting here.
Yeah, and it was really specific and not again far-flung, like sci-fi specific. It was just, hey, we've polled a lot of people and everybody thinks that if you don't go through this, I mean, it's going to be okay because they understand that this is like appalling, and there's no expectation for you to do this. You're still going to be okay. Your career's going to be fine. It's just, we'll handle this. Don't worry. Everything will take care of itself. And that was the discussion kind of in the office, right? What's my reputation going to be?
Like, that was the important part. I mean, obviously, yeah, that princess and her life or whatever, but how is this polling for me?
Yeah.
It hits a little close to home. I live in Washington, D.C., so that, to me, it was both funny and sad at the same time.
Yeah. And then kind of along that same narrative, something happens throughout the episode, right? Someone finds out through Twitter that they're kind of doing some trickery. We can go back to the trickery in a second. But, and then so the person who is holding the princess releases another video where he cuts a finger off and sends it to a news outlet. And then all the polling reverses. And all of a sudden it's, wait a minute, no. Everything that was current, this all happened in the span of a day. So in just a matter of hours, it was like, nope, now everything is going against you now. Now people are saying you have to do it because that poor girl is getting hurt. And that one image changed everything and changed everybody's opinion.
Mm-hmm. And again, just something, like you said, it was distributed to the news network. And I mean, that's kind of where the story went next, is after we find the PM in his office and his staff supporting him, it cuts to a BBC News network. And this was kind of the next part that got me thinking, is the head of the network is trying to basically shut it down. Like, they've been issued an order from, this is going to show my naivete when it comes to foreign politics, but from Parliament or from the PM to, like, shut it down. Like, they can't talk about it.
It's called a D-notice.
A D-notice, that's what it was.
I looked it up. It's a real thing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, we don't have anything like that in the States.
No, we don't. And
it's crazy.
Yeah. So that in itself was kind of crazy that you could censor the media like that. But they put out this D-notice, and the media outlet was respecting it, so they weren't going to talk about this particular thing. But many of the staff writers were saying this is stupid because it's all over Twitter, it's all over Facebook, it's all over YouTube. Like, this thing is viral, it's huge. How can we pretend this isn't happening? And, it's too late. There's no groundbreaking reporting. Like, we can't really ignore that this is happening, but they're like, no, we're gonna observe this D-notice. And again, that to me was a point of, okay, this is a real interesting commentary on new media versus traditional media. of the wild, wild west of social media and the controlled, regulated, traditional, mainstream kind of media, and how those two are kind of going at it.
Yeah, and it wasn't until I saw this show and I even heard the concept of a D-notice that I even thought of any country, any Western countries doing something like that. Because we hear about like North Korea and, over the years we've heard about different things where governments are trying to shut down certain streams and shutting down different, parts of their internet infrastructure, talking to social media companies so that certain messages don't get out. But again, it's that contrast. Like, you can't control Twitter. You can't control YouTube, no matter how hard you try. And it would be up to, I guess, Google or Twitter itself, right, to sometimes step in and do that kind of thing. But they have a pretty hands-off policy. And even when they try, they really can't, It's really hard.
It is the great democratizing power of the internet, for good or for bad. And I think that was a really good glimpse into, because again, since it is kind of Twilight Zone, there's always like a twist or a turn or something like that. And I'm sure we'll get to that. But this was a great social commentary on how the internet has taken power away from governments. Yeah. Because governments used to be able to control the spin and control what message got out there, and that's just not the case anymore, both in the Black Mirror universe and in our current one. So just the empowering nature of the internet and how you can just kind of get whatever you want. You're not relying on somebody to get you the news. It's already out there for your consumption.
Yeah. Yeah, and even, they didn't go down this rabbit hole, but, if YouTube would have stepped in and said, no, we're not going to do it, it would have been on BitTorrent, and, there was just no way to stop it.
Yeah, it's an unstoppable force, is what it is, and the people in power are left powerless.
Yeah. So social media doesn't have nationalities. So once they announced, it's on MSNBC, it's on CNN, it's on Al Jazeera, that was it. They were like, well, it's out there. Like, it makes no sense to kind of follow this D-notice anymore. And they kind of fell in line.
Yeah. So yeah, it wasn't that it was out on Twitter, but once the traditional, quote-unquote, traditional media start putting it out there, like C-SPAN, or not C-SPAN, I'm sorry, MSNBC, then they're like, oh, well, I guess we have to not pretend this isn't existing. And again, that's kind of that groupthink mentality of, one is a respectable media source and one is not, like putting that differential line between what is quote-unquote real news and what is just not real news, like Twitter versus internet's not serious kind of news.
And I watch a lot of, not a lot, but I watch quite a bit of cable news, and every now and then you hear someone say, something is going on and we're just not going to talk about it because we don't think it's real news, And it's kind of who decides that? Who is that up to?
Well, not the government anymore.
Not at all. Oh, it's just that whole part, just that whole concept of, again, I can't believe a D-notice is a real thing. It just blew my mind.
Yeah, that was a little odd for me. Although, I know in real life that the UK has cameras everywhere. Like, there's security cameras on pretty much every street corner. So I guess I wasn't totally surprised. But I hadn't really thought about it as being a thing. And I think that's kind of a cultural bias that you and I had going into this. Is it seemed even more shocking because that's a thing? That actually exists. But yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And if I'm right, the next scene is with him and his wife. Just about, and she's kind of expressing the point of view of the internet, basically saying, it's not even so much that you do or do not have sex with a pig, but the fact that it has been introduced as a possibility, people are already seeing it. So kind of the power of suggestion.
Yeah, exactly. Whether they did it or they didn't, her life was affected forever.
Yes.
I'm the woman married to the man who was asked to do this thing, and everybody thought about it. That's how they see you now, whether you do it or you don't.
So the idea, once again, of external perception having a very real impact on people's lives.
There's two things that are happening. There's the assistant who's trying to make the FX, the special effects version, to go live on TV. And then the other one is there's two parallel stories. There's that, and then there's the looking for the guy. So where they actually find the,
right.
Where they trace the signal, and they have like a SWAT team go out and try to find the origin of the signal.
Yeah, and they track him down, and they fail pretty spectacularly, end up shooting a reporter in the leg. and it's this kind of huge colossal failure. And then on the other track, they're trying to set up, basically, I think they got a porn star to have sex with the pig, so that way they could just map the PM's face on it.
Yeah, and that's the kind of the trickery I mentioned before. They hired a special effects. I think he'd won they said he won an Oscar for special effects or something like that. And they gave him all the specifications, and they said, this is what has to happen. We have to see the Prime Minister having sex with a pig live on television, this way, with these angles, this lighting, and we don't want the Prime Minister there. It has to be someone else. So that's when they got the porn star. And someone saw the porn star going into that building and took a picture of him, posted it on Twitter, and that's how the guy who kidnapped the princess found out that they were trying to cheat their way out of it. And he ended up cutting the girl's finger and sending it to the news outlets. So what do you think about that whole special effects part? Like, I think that's the part that seems the most sci-fi-ish of it all. Like, could they possibly do that? Could they, on live television with a moving camera, have the Prime Minister appear to be having sex with a pig, but not actually be there?
I guess I didn't think so much about that, but as if people see him doing it, even if it's not him, like, this is fulfilling what the wife was saying. I mean, obviously, it's for him, it's not as bad as actually having to have intercourse with a swine, but it still looks like he did, and this episode is all about appearances. So I guess, I mean, technically, I don't know. I'm sure it is possible somehow. I mean, we can put a rover on Mars. We can probably map somebody's face. I don't know how seamless it would be. But I was really struck by the fact that this kind of very observant government, you know, one that has cameras on every street corner and is trying to shut down YouTube and is trying to have, like, eyes everywhere, is itself being watched by the everyday person, because that guy could take a picture of the porn star and upload it. And, you know, that's just the way that information travels. Again, it's so uncontrolled. It's kind of chaotic of how information in social media, and at least in this representation, is kind of screwing with everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and it didn't take very long. It was just, and I love the way they casually just had a guy there, like, oh, you're that porn star. And then he just took a picture, and it wasn't, you know, then later you find out all the ramifications that had.
Yes, just that one thing, and it, you know, talk about a ripple effect, and just kind of got out of hand, because that tweet led to, and the botched rescue attempt led to the kidnapper cutting off a finger and sending it to this news outlet, who then shared that with everybody, and as we mentioned earlier, that kind of changed public opinion, and all of a sudden the staffer who was talking about, you know, oh, you're polling really well on Twitter, people are really behind you, starts talking about, oh, 80% of the country thinks you should do it, or 80% of whoever, you know, whatever social media he's tapping into at that point, thinks you should do it. And then you can really see the Prime Minister's face just kind of sicken. And, yeah, there's this really awkward point where it's like, okay, the internet's really powerful. I mean, these are people who, they're not even from your country. Like, they might not even have, and it's election year. So that's also something to keep in mind.
And I don't know, they don't explicitly say this, but it's kind of implied that maybe all that public opinion swayed the crown, because then they say, hey, you know, the Queen said, you kind of have to do this. If not, I think that the phrase was, we can't guarantee the safety of your family. He was essentially threatened at that point. Yeah,
do whatever you can to protect the princess. Otherwise, we can't guarantee the safety of your family if you don't.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, you already got the Queen telling you, and you've got public opinion going against you. And
I wonder how much of that was swayed by public opinion, you know?
Right.
Like, again, you live in D.C., we know what a big difference that can make. But we don't have that same kind of structure here in the government. So, but again, they don't say it explicitly. They don't say the crown was swayed one way or the other. But just it's so interesting to think about that it could have gotten to that point.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess kind of a modern day corollary would be when SOPA went down. What was it, 2013? I think. Either early 2014 or 2013. That was basically they can throttle the internet act. And the outrage on Twitter and social media was so huge, and now a little more than a year later, you have the president saying, hey, I'm going to support cities that open up broadband, and also coming out in favor of the FCC, which will make a decision later this year about classifying the internet as a utility. So once again, it's net neutrality, and it's all this really important information where, you know, it really was the vocal masses of online media rallying the troops and kind of shouting down this particular piece of legislation. So it's definitely not so far flung that it's impossible, but actually it's very possible. It happens, like in real life. What happened there, at least up until this point, I think could certainly have happened in modern day.
Yeah. I mean, we are in a point, right, today, we have President Obama in the White House, and he not only, we know that he cares about what people are saying online, his campaigns were very focused online. So he knows how important all of that is, and more than most other public figures before him.
Yes. Definitely the most savvy tech president we've ever had. And he even gave addresses on YouTube during his campaign and as president. So he understands that the internet is very, very powerful. And I think something else to point out is it's super powerful when you're in it. You know, looking back on something that was really difficult to get through, like a year later, it's not so bad. It seems like, oh, that wasn't such a big deal. But when you're in it, like if you're being attacked on Twitter or you're receiving any kind of hate mail like that, in the moment, it's really hard to get perspective. Yeah. And I think that's kind of what happens to the PM.
To wrap up that part of it, when I asked you about the special effects stuff, I didn't research it too much, but I do remember seeing an episode of the Jimmy Fallon show where he had I don't remember what they called it, but it was like he was making his pectorals dance, and they had they were competing, Jimmy Fallon and Terry Crews. And okay. So what they did was they actually had another person there in place, shirtless, in place for Jimmy Fallon, and they mapped Jimmy Fallon's head on top of it. Wow. And the way they recorded it. And then later on they show it, and the guy had like I don't remember if he had a green hood on his face like they showed the porn star with, but he was standing behind a green screen. So they were able to kind of map both things happening at the same time. So there wasn't a camera moving around or anything like that, but in its simplest form, it's absolutely possible. Absolutely possible. Yeah.
And I think that definitely is one of the most uncomfortable things about this particular episode of Black Mirror is that it could be now. Like, it could be today. That could happen at any moment. There's nothing really so far flung in this particular episode that I feel like it couldn't happen today.
Yeah. And so the special effects trickery didn't happen. They didn't catch the guy because he kind of, did something and he fooled them all. So it comes to that point where everybody's telling him, you have to do this. You have to do it. And so we get to the point where he goes to do it. He has to do it at, I think it's 4:00, right, in the episode?
Yes, that's the deadline.
So he's driving over, and I don't think there was anything else we're missing before that, right? We're pretty much...
Nope, I mean, that's pretty succinct. Yeah.
And so there was this really interesting conversation with one of his staff members on the way to... once they're already at the building, and he's walking to the pig, they have this really interesting conversation. Do you remember what she said about the psychologist we talked to and the pills and all that?
Yes, the psychologist said, take as long as you need, and other recommendations are don't go too fast because otherwise it might look like you're enjoying it.
It'll look like people will think you liked it, and we can't have that. So they actually prepared for that possibility. Unbelievable. They had to have that conversation with him. Oh, again, it's all about perception in the episode.
Yeah, it is, and I think... Up until this point, I didn't necessarily put it together, but again, my husband, he's a political science person, and his remark on this episode is, wow, this is really all about a politician will do anything if it means his ratings will be good. So that was kind of his cynical approach to it, and I was like, oh, well, yeah, he is literally going to have sex with a pig for his... Now, of course, there's the idea that the princess is going to be murdered if he doesn't, so that's kind of a different dimension. But I think what got me is that after they have that conversation, so they're like prepping him on how to present himself to the pig, which is absurd, but it's so true. Like if anybody's ever watched, Veep, which is a great comedy about politics, they literally have conversations about what flavor of ice cream the vice president should eat to give the best appearance.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that kind of just meticulous, minute detail processing that people get into in order to sway opinion, in order to present themselves and to control how things are being presented, even in the situation where they have no control.
Oh, the other guy has a playlist? I need a playlist. Get a playlist together for me. What does it say about me?
Yep.
Yeah. Veep is really
and
good.
And then, oh, it's so good. It's so funny. And then they hand him a cup, and there's a pill in it. And I was sitting there thinking, I wonder what that is. Now, maybe that's naive of me, but I was wondering if it was like a muscle relaxer or an anti-anxiety medication or like LSD or something to help him dissociate. But I actually kind of think it was probably Viagra.
Yeah, that's what I assumed it was, right? It's like, because I think one of the specifications was the classy way they said it was he has to go all the way with the pig. So he has to finish. So I assumed that that's what it was, that it was just Viagra. But you're right, it was a little cup. There may have been other things in there to kind of help him out. There could have been many different things that they could have used to help him out. And I'm assuming there may have been.
And then he goes and he introduces himself to the pig. And I felt so bad for him. Like, I felt absolutely terrible because he looks just horrific and terrified and sick. And all the while, the screen is cutting around to different places around London, like a pub and a hospital and different social venues where people are just basically, not exactly, but sitting there like popping popcorn, watching the spectacle, this voyeuristic idea of us watching this poor man go through a horrifically traumatic event.
Now, I think, so the expectation was that people would watch it, right?
Yes, that was the point.
Yeah, and so the government did try a few different things. They tried an audible noise that would make people nauseous, right? Mm-hmm. They played that for a while before the video, hoping that people would kind of tune out, change the channel. And they actually asked people to please change the channel.
Yeah, to turn it off or look away. Yeah. And of course no one did.
Nobody did. There were, again, like you said, gatherings at pubs. They kept showing this hospital where the entire staff was there just watching it in the hallway.
Yeah.
It was, again, just the idea that we know people are going to watch this, and please, like, don't watch this. It's bad enough. And it didn't work at all.
No.
The whole city was just quiet. So quiet, in fact, that things happened while everybody was getting ready to watch the video, and nobody noticed.
Nobody noticed.
Yep.
And I think what was really interesting is that when people did start watching and they saw that it was happening, a lot of them looked disgusted, but they couldn't look away. Yep. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty on point. It's a train wreck. It's awful, but it's so awful we can't look away. Or maybe it's the pressure of the people around us, is that if we stop watching. I mean, I think that was really played out in the hospital scene where the girl was like, hey, can we please turn this off? This is horrible. And the male doctor said, no, this is history.
Yeah. And what makes it worse was, I mean, he was going at it for an hour.
An hour. That's...
Oh. Yeah. And everybody, and you could tell, like, the people looked tired. And then they showed him, of course, he looked exhausted and disgusted, but the people looked tired. But they wouldn't stop looking away. You know?
Yeah.
There wasn't, they didn't, at least the groups that we were seeing, and every time they showed the city, there was no movement. Everybody was just focused on that.
Yeah, they would show shots of the streets and everything was deserted and everybody was just fixated on whatever screen was nearest them. And, you know, when it finally finished, you know, they cut to the poor PM and he's vomiting horrifically into a toilet. And again, I felt so terrible for him.
Yeah.
Like, I wanted to kind of puke, too, in solidarity.
Oh, yeah, that whole episode was kind of an emotional roller coaster. Like, to the viewer. Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so while he's vomiting, the assistant who set up, you know, the botched special effects is informed of something that happened that we kind of alluded to earlier while everybody in the streets were empty.
Yeah. The guy who kidnapped the princess let her go at 3:30, and the prime minister didn't have to start doing anything with the pig until 4 o'clock. But everybody was so ready, so focused on this one event that nobody noticed when she was set free and on the street. She ended up fainting, so she couldn't like call anybody or anything like that. But she was gone. She was free. I mean, and again, I don't know how much surveillance is really in the city, but you can even assume that if there are cameras everywhere, what were the guys who usually watch the cameras doing? Like, were they also watching the video and nobody noticed? It seemed like a really open space. It was a bridge, very, very wide open, where you think somebody would have seen something. She was wearing like a bright green dress. And throughout the whole thing, half an hour before they even started. So before that, even that conversation that they had with him about, don't do it too fast, here are the pills. By that point, she was already free. Yeah,
and she was out. I mean, I think they mentioned that she had been drugged. Like, she was kind of drowsy and disoriented. Yeah. So, like you said, she might not have been able to call for help. And she just kind of collapsed on the bridge. Yeah. But that was kind of like the aha moment for this particular episode, is that if people had turned away, if people had not been so absorbed in the radical fantasticness of this horrific event, somebody would have noticed. Somebody would have realized that she was there, and that this never would not have come to this if people had been, I guess, unplugged is the best way to describe it.
Yeah. I mean, just complete focused attention on this one horrible thing. It was just, I can't come up with a word right now, just how, I don't know, just how weird it is, right? Like, nobody could look away from this type of event because they just had to be a part of it almost, I think. And everybody was, and they didn't realize what happened. And then we find out that the guy who ended up kidnapping her was an artist. And he had never cut off her finger. He had cut off his own finger. And he hung himself, and the whole thing was just one giant piece of performance art.
That was the assumption. One thing that really did bother me, probably the most unrealistic thing about this, are you telling me a man's artist's finger, you couldn't tell that wasn't the princess's? Like, that's what got me a little bit, and they do call back a little bit later and say that the DNA results found that the finger was male's and not female's. Okay, yeah. But come on, I'm like...
That was during the same conversation with the assistant where they said, oh, she was let go and she's unharmed. They're like, what about the finger? Oh, no, that was a man's finger. It's like, what, nobody said anything? We didn't know before?
You can't tell. I mean, just looking at it, you can't tell. Especially a princess, she's probably got really dainty fingers with, like, really nice nails, and this is probably a gross dude's finger. And so anyway, that was probably my biggest bugaboo.
It seemed to be his pinky, by the way. So maybe.
Maybe. But yeah, then you see he's hung himself, and it's like 1 year later they're kind of recapping, oh, this was a performance art, it's the 1 year anniversary of this certain thing, and the PM is doing good. He looks outwardly like he's doing well. I think he won re-election, and everything seems to be going okay.
Well, and then right before we get to the end, I think the whole idea that it was performance art, like, people do all sorts of stuff for performance art. That's true. And then there's this weird respect for the whole thing afterwards, right? 1 year later, where they're talking about the anniversary of what some people call, like, the first great art of the 21st century. And it's like, like, man, like, it changed. The perception of even the event completely changed. And then you see the princess is doing fine, and the prime minister was reelected, and everything seems happy, and it almost seems like everything was forgiven and almost forgotten. I think that's a great a metaphor for social media and how the world works now. Like, something is a big deal today, and then tomorrow nobody cares anymore.
Yeah, it's totally forgotten, or it's looked at with some kind of retrospective respect. And I think what really got me is people are talking about this event like it wasn't a terrorist thing, like it wasn't at least a traumatic event. And I just, I guess it bothered my psychology sensibilities that this poor man was seen as less than human, that the rights of another human being usurped his own, and it really bothered me. Again, which is why I really wanted to process this particular series, because again, it was traumatic, and he acts like nothing happened, but then we go behind closed doors.
And They are not well. Him and his wife, their relationship seems to be completely destroyed. Like an event like that would destroy a couple's relationship. It would destroy a person's life. And like you said, behind closed doors, things are not okay. The rest of the world is fine. Everybody saw it. Everyone moved past it. They forgot it. But I'm so glad that they did that at the end, because they showed, things happen, and sometimes you see things online and you think they're funny, or you think they're entertaining, and there are people's lives at stake. They don't show the effect on the princess, by the way, which I'm sure was horrible for her too, because they made her read those demands. Because she explained all of that in detail, the prime minister had to do what he did, and she was actually kidnapped and tied up. She wasn't treated okay. She wasn't a part of the art. She was just a victim.
Yeah. And I think what was poignant for me is that before you go behind closed doors, it shows the PM like doing his political thing, going around kissing babies, that kind of thing, and his wife is with him, and they both look so happy, and again, putting on pretenses, putting out that perspective of what you want people to see. And then once behind closed doors, you can see that they are really not okay, and that it's basically all an act for the public.
I mean, I don't know how related it is, but it reminds me of when you see like a politician who had an affair and then he brings his wife up while he's apologizing, It's like, what? Like, why are you doing that type of thing? And yeah, it's like, it's more important what people think and see. So let's put our feelings, on the back burner, and let's put on a show.
That a politician will do anything to keep his position, and whether that's continue in an unhappy marriage, have sex with a pig, bend to the will of Twitter. Again, I felt terrible for him. Of course I felt terrible for his wife. I just kind of felt terrible for everybody. But I think it just really kind of drove across that, it's here today, gone tomorrow, but there is lasting impact. And I can't help but think of Star Wars Kid. He had if you don't know who Star Wars Kid is, you need to just go Google that.
Or don't.
But,
or don't.
Well, yeah. So anyway, there's this kid playing Star Wars, and it was really cute, and I thought it was adorable. But then he kind of got famous for it, and people started picking on him, like, unmercifully. And, that kid probably has some real issues, and he, I know, became really had a really hard time because of the cyberbullying, or whatever you want to call it. And so and then, the next day people forgot about it, and people don't remember. But that person who went through it, they remember. And that can be a very traumatizing thing, and I don't think people understand the power that they hold when they post or talk or comment on social media.
Over the years, there's just more and more reality television, right? And a lot of it is at the a lot of it is laughing at the people who are on the show.
Oh gosh, it's exhibitionistic.
Yeah, and a lot of people enjoy that, and it's become one of our most popular mediums. So, I mean, I think that commentary in the episode too. It's like, what could possibly get everybody to watch at the same time? Oh,
I think about Honey Boo Boo and Duck Dynasty. Yeah. I mean, those shows are created to poke fun and to look at other people as being less than people, and it really, those shows really, really bother me, because again, it's one thing on The Bachelor, do you take this rose? Okay, whatever. But, these are people's lives that you're filming in their homes with their families and their children. And it feels like voyeuristic. Again, that word just kind of keeps coming up in my mind over and over and over again.
Even The Bachelor, there's ads for it now on TV, and the ads are showing the girls who are doing the wildest stuff and the ones who are crying and the ones who are saying the funniest, like the stupidest things, right? That's what gets the most attention. If it was
it's the extreme.
Yeah, if it was a straightforward speed dating show, it wouldn't be as popular as it is. And you cut out all the boring stuff, and then you just, again, it is voyeuristic, and that's where we are now.
A really great kind of case study in this would be Survivor. So, for example, like the first season or two of Survivor really focused on the actual surviving. You know, if you watch Survivor now and you go back and you watch the first or second season, it seems really slow. It seems almost dull because it's focused on how do I make fire. And you look now, 10, 15 years later, Survivor 2006 or whatever number they're on, and it's all about the interpersonal drama.
The allegiances, who stabbed each other's back, who's ridiculous, etc. No.
Yeah, like who is acting out the most? Who's the wild and craziest? And that seems to be, or like the show Wipeout, when you're competing on that obstacle course and it's all about falling. It's so much Schadenfreude. I guess that's the word I'm looking for. Voyeuristic Schadenfreude.
Oh, it is. I don't watch a lot of reality TV. I don't.
Either.
And it's because of that.
Apparently we watched Black Mirror instead.
Yes, which is pretty messed up, but
Oh,
yeah, it's kind of messed up. I think actually what we're talking about now, we could go into a lot of detail in the second episode of Black Mirror. Actually, it has a lot to do with kind of these topics that we're touching on now.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be overlap because when I was looking at it, I was thinking that they took a really extreme view on technology. Like Black Mirror to me is if you take kind of what's happening now and then you just push it to the utmost extreme. For example, if something like that were to happen, I don't think everybody would be glued to the TV. I think a large portion would, but I also think that, somebody would have noticed the princess being free. I think that, again, it's an extreme to make a point, and I totally get that.
It might not be, maybe everybody might not watch it, but it would probably have the highest ratings of anything that year, for example. Something like that.
Yeah, more than the Super Bowl.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, so sad. That's where we're at.
I guess it's sad, but then I realize it wouldn't happen that way. Like, for example, if I'm like, okay, if I'm going to apply that to where we are right now, it wouldn't happen that way. And so I guess in that kind of sense, it makes me feel better, because if this is the absolute extreme worst, at least we're not there.
Actually, that's a really good point. I think
that's positive reframing. That's the psych of PsychTech.
That's something I think about a lot when there's so many bad things that happen that you see on the news, but none of it is as horrible as the stuff that we consume in our action movies and our any sort of fiction. I mean, it never really doesn't get that bad.
The idea that 80% of Twitter would be on one side is preposterous.
Yeah, true.
I mean, as soon as there's one side, there's the counter side, and then there's the counter side to the counter, and then there's the counter side, and it's everybody always just like bouncing off of each other. You would never get a consensus. Again, just an extreme to exaggerate what's going on. And again, I think if you're going to make a point about technology and the way we use it, taking it to extremes is almost a performance piece unto itself.
It's the best way to make your point, and the best way to kind of bring light to things that are really there is to bring it to that extreme.
Or to get conversations like this started.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, do you know where the name Black Mirror comes from?
So I don't, but I'm going to... My guess was that it's like a dark reflection of ourselves. Is it? No?
I thought that, because I thought, that's like super deep and stuff. And then I did some research, and it's actually just a code name for our smartphones.
I like mine better.
I do too. I do too. Or both. They can exist.
It's a good name. It's a good name for a show.
Yeah, yeah, it's really good. And so the show itself, like we mentioned before, it's 6 episodes in total.
7. There's a Christmas special.
Oh, I cannot wait for the Christmas
I wasn't
special.
kidding.
So British series tend to be pretty short.
Yeah.
And we will go through them, but we definitely wanted to start on this one. And I mean, I guess if I was to have kind of like a takeaway message from this, is the power of the internet. Like, that would be my catchphrase for this particular episode, is that it's all about perception and the power of the internet.
Even the title, the national anthem. Like, what is the song? What is the chorus of the nation, of the country? And for that day, it was that everyone was on the same page for that.
Yeah, sex that pig.
Yeah.
Sex that pig. Item number 1 of things I thought I would never say on a podcast.
Yes, yeah, it is. I mean, it is an incredible concept for a show. Like, just, I mean, and to make it clear, each episode of the show is self-contained, so it is like the Twilight Zone in that sense, in a few different ways, but it is self-contained. So there isn't the second episode has nothing to do with the first one. And I'm assuming there's no connection later on.
No, I've seen almost all of them, and there's nothing that ties them together.
Okay.
I guess the only thing that I really wanted to touch on is, again, it's getting more into the psych aspect of it, but that kind of mob mentality, kind of almost the bystander effect. There's all these people, and if they were all out looking for the princess, instead of staring at the TV, they would have found her, or if they had all at least just turned off the TV, the whole point of this trauma would have been negated.
I didn't even think of that. Oh, you're right. Like if Amber Alerts and all that kind of stuff, like if people would have started looking, you're right. That's probably the best takeaway and commentary on where we are right now. Oh.
It's that groupthink. And, for example, when that one girl tried to turn off the TV and he was like, no, this is history. If other people had supported her, they would have turned the TV off. But, having no voice or one voice just gets drowned out in a mob mentality. And it's kind of a normalizing thing. Well, if all three of my friends are watching, it must be okay for me to watch. And it's really kind of scary. That's what kind of scared me more than anything else in this episode, was just the extreme of mob mentality. Because unfortunately, there are historical references for people getting behind an idea that on the outside looks totally crazy, but you fall in line. Obedience to authority, groupthink. You just kind of go with the flow because you don't want to be on the outside. And
yeah. And again, they could have rallied everybody to do the opposite. The government could have tried. Wow.
Or even the people themselves. Yeah. Hey, again, this is another reason why I think it's, I feel okay about this episode is if this was IRL, so to speak, I can guarantee you there would have been Twitter connections about finding the princess. I mean, there's Twitter connections right now when people lose their dogs. Mm-hmm. So there would have been, I feel like, maybe this is my optimistic self, but I feel like there would have been some kind of mobilization of good people trying to help, tip lines and reporting in and going on searches and, again, the counter to this particular traumatic event.
And I feel that way today in 2015, but when that show was released in 2011, if you would have asked me if I thought that people would rally behind it and do something, I don't know if I would have believed it like I do now, because I've seen like so much positivity online over the last, just so recently, that I can believe it now. I still think it's the idea of, well, you could do it for good or you could do it for bad. Like if we all pooled our resources, we could do something great. I believe that, but not today. I do believe that we would try to help her instead of just watching.
I think that's a good point. I had totally forgotten. This debuted in 2011, so it means it was probably filmed in 2009 or 2010. And that's a very different world than where we are right now. And, right now I'm coming from a place where I've seen stuff like the SOPA protests and all the human rights protests and things like that, where social media has really been used as this megaphone for diversity and for giving everybody a voice.
4 years ago, a hashtag wasn't what it is today.
It was a pound sign. Yeah. Back in my day, it was a pound sign. And you put it after your credit card number on the phone when you use the phone book. No one used phone books. No phone books. That's not technology. No, that's anti-tech.
So any other thoughts on the episode, or any other thoughts on the podcast and kind of where you want it to go?
No, I think we covered the episode pretty well. I would, of course, love to hear what other people think, because I know when I asked my husband, and he came from his poli-sci background, that was really illuminating for me, because I had never thought of a politician will even have sex with a pig if it means he gets reelected. And that's exactly what happened. So that was really interesting for me to hear from him. So I'd love to hear other people's comments and their observations about the show and what they thought about it. I think that's what I'm most excited about for our Black Mirror podcasts. And then going forward, just kind of picking up on other topics and exploring the psychological and technological aspects of them. I know one suggestion I've already had thrown at me is the psychology of achievements. Why do people like achievements so much?
Oh, I am a trophy something, let me tell you. I cannot. Yeah, I need trophies in my life. I would love to have that discussion.
So that's kind of the idea we have going forward is, an episode of Black Mirror, and then we'll mix it up with a couple things, and then maybe in a week or 2 or 3, have another episode going into the next Black Mirror, so that way everybody has time to watch the episode and get caught up and whatnot.
Yeah, and there are a few other really good examples in TV and in movies that I think would be great starting off points to discuss just so many different topics. And I've got a whole list of them because this is my favorite genre, sci-fi and this futurism stuff. Oh, it's just, man, I love it. I
mean, movies like Her are ripe for the picking.
Yeah.
So there's a ton out there, and when I was trying to brainstorm ideas, I told my husband, I am suffering from the paradox of choice. There is too much to choose from. So again, in addition to sharing your possible thoughts about this episode of Black Mirror, about the podcast, if there is a topic you want us to delve into, please feel free to contact us. It's contact@psychtechpodcast.com. So you can email us or follow us on Twitter. It's @PsychTechCast. Because podcast is too long to fit on Twitter. And we also have a Facebook page. So,
and then just the website, PsychTechPodcast.com. And you can contact us directly, see notes on the episode. So we'll definitely put in how to find Black Mirror so you can have information on it, what episode we saw, and maybe some other tidbits there too. Yeah,
any of the psychology or technology bombs that we dropped, link to that. Yep. So if you don't know what voyeurism is, we'll have a link for it.
Or if you don't know how to spell it, we'll spell it for you.
Okay. Does anybody really know how to spell it? Because that's what spell check is for.
I'm a good speller. I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, spell voyeurism. Go.
That's all the time we have today on PsychTech. So thank you, Kelli.
Thank you.
And we'll be back next week, hopefully.
No, of course we will. Yes.
All right. Fantastic.
I'll put it into my external brain, and that I hold in the palm of my hand that contains all of human knowledge.
Black Mirror?
Yes, I will put it into my. Oh, that's so perfect! I will put it into my Black Mirror.
All right. So I'm Josué Cardona,
I'm Kelli,
and we'll see you next time.
Bye bye.